My marriage had settled into a rhythm. Not the comforting kind. More like a low, constant hum of quiet disconnection. Derek and I used to talk late into the night, laugh over silly movies, even get lost in each other's touch. But now it felt like we were polite strangers sharing a mortgage. It wasn't dramatic. He wasn't cruel or absent. Just detached. Like someone turned the volume down on us and neither of us had the energy to reach for the remote. Mornings were brief exchanges over coffee. Nights were him on the couch with his laptop while I scrolled through my phone upstairs. Our conversations had reduced to calendar events, grocery lists, and the occasional "did you pick up the dry cleaning?" When my lower back flared up again, an old injury from a hiking accident, I reminded him over breakfast. "I'm gonna need physio again," I said, rubbing the spot absently. "Yeah. Didn't they sort that out last time?" he replied, still half looking at his emails. I nodded, but there was nothing else to say. He didn't ask how bad it was. He didn't offer to drive me. I booked it myself, through a new clinic a friend had recommended. That's when I met Jason. He was younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, with an easy confidence in the way he stood, the kind that wasn't cocky but grounded. His handshake was firm, and his smile was unforced. I noticed his forearms before I realized I was staring, veined, strong, precise, like he knew exactly how to use them. "Nina, right? Let's see what we're dealing with," he said, leading me to the padded therapy table. The first session was completely normal. He asked all the right questions. Where the pain radiated. When it got worse. Any other issues. His fingers moved carefully along my spine and lower back, never inappropriate. But something about the way he listened, it wasn't the usual clinical detachment. He was present. Fully. Back home, Derek asked how it went. I told him it was fine. He barely looked up. "Don't forget we've got dinner with my boss on Friday," he added. I hadn't forgotten. I just didn't care. Not anymore. Second session with Jason came fast. The moment I walked in, I noticed he had remembered something small, eucalyptus oil. It was the one I mentioned liking last time. The room smelled faintly of it. He gave a short smile. "You said this one relaxes you." That hit deeper than it should have. Just being remembered felt dangerous. As I lay down on the table again, he worked in smooth, confident motions. His hands moved with precision, but there was softness there too, like he wasn't just fixing muscles, he was reading my body. "You've been tense," he murmured, pressing into a tight knot just above my hip. I exhaled sharply. "Yeah, just life stuff." "Anything you want to talk about?" he asked casually, but there was warmth in it. I didn't answer. His hands paused just for a second, enough to notice, then resumed their careful work. There was nothing physical. Not yet. But I felt it. The shift. The line we weren't talking about but both knew was there. Back at home, Derek was working late. I ate dinner alone, barely tasting it. My phone buzzed, a short message from Jason confirming my next session. Just that. But I read it twice. In the mirror that night, I looked at myself longer than usual. I wasn't wearing anything special, just a t-shirt and shorts. But there was something in my face, something awake again. A spark I hadn't seen in months. Maybe years. Was I just starved for attention? Or was this more? I told myself it was harmless. He was just a therapist. I was just another client. Nothing had happened. But the truth clung to me as I tried to sleep. Something had happened. Not with hands. Not with lips. But in the space between us. A silent invitation. And I hadn't said no. The third session with Jason started like the others, but something in me felt different. I had spent the entire night replaying how close he'd been, how his hands seemed to understand more than just pain. There was no denying it now. I was dressing differently before each session. Subtle changes. A softer shade of lipstick. A tighter sports bra. Leggings that hugged in all the right places. Things I hadn't cared about in years. I told myself it was about confidence, healing, recovery. But I knew it was more. "Looks like that tension's still there," Jason said, brushing his thumb gently across my lower back as I laid down. Can't seem to let go of it, I murmured. The words slipped out too easily. He adjusted his position. I felt the weight of his body shift behind me. His fingers pressed deeper, finding the knot that always made me wince, but this time, I didn't. I didn't want him to stop. You okay with the pressure? He asked. I could feel his breath just a little too close to my neck. It's good. There was a long pause. His hands stayed where they were. No movement. Just heat. Silence. And the pounding of my heart. He didn't move forward, but he didn't pull away either. I bit my lip. Still, I didn't ask him to stop. By the time I left, the air between us was thick with everything unspoken. I could still feel his touch long after the session ended. It wasn't what he did, it was what he almost did. What I almost let happen. Derek was already home when I walked in, his Bluetooth headset in, pacing as he talked numbers to someone from work. He gave me a nod but didn't hang up. Dinner was a leftover salad. I sat across from him while he continued his call, his eyes never really seeing me. I booked us a weekend in the city next month, I said, just to see if he'd respond. He gave a distracted thumbs up. That night, we lay in the same bed but on opposite edges, like two continents drifting farther apart. Jason texted me the next morning. Not just a reminder, something personal. Good job yesterday. You held the pain better. Maybe you're tougher than you think. I stared at the message too long. That one sentence carried more warmth than anything Derek had said to me in weeks. At the next session, the air between us wasn't just charged, it was magnetic. I wore a loose off-shoulder top. Not inappropriate, but revealing enough to draw attention. I caught him glance once, just once, but it landed like a spark on dry wood. Lie face down, he said, voice lower than usual. I obeyed. As his hands worked, his fingers slipped just beneath the fabric of my waistband, adjusting the towel slightly to give him access to the right muscle. But he didn't stop there. His palm brushed my hip bone, slow and deliberate. My breath caught. You okay? He asked, his tone unreadable. I bit my lip again and nodded. His fingers pressed lower, not too far, but enough to make my skin burn. My legs stiffened slightly, and he paused. This was the moment. The pause between permission and denial. I could have pushed his hand away. I could have sat up, laughed it off, ended the confusion. But I didn't. I said nothing. He continued, slow, deliberate strokes over tense muscle, fingers grazing skin that hadn't felt wanted in far too long. I couldn't speak. My body responded in ways that betrayed every vow I had ever made. When the session ended, I sat on the table, heart pounding. He offered a towel to wipe the massage oil from my hands, and our fingers brushed. The touch lingered. I looked at him then. Really looked. He was breathing slowly, controlled, but his eyes were hungry. Controlled chaos. I grabbed my bag and left quickly, but my legs felt like air. Back home, Derek was asleep on the couch, a half-drunk glass of scotch on the table. I showered in silence, letting the water run hotter than usual, trying to rinse away the heat that still lingered on my skin. But it wasn't guilt I felt. It was awakening. Something raw had been pulled from me. Something that had been asleep for too long. And I hadn't pushed him away. The next few days passed in a haze. I went through motions, folding laundry, replying to emails, cooking for two even though I usually ate alone. Derek was home but absent, always somewhere else in his head, phone in hand, work on his mind. If he noticed the way I stared off into nothing at dinner, he didn't say a word. Jason's texts were subtle. Not flirty, not too forward. But personal. Let me know if the pain flares up again. I can squeeze you in even after hours if needed. I read it 3 times. I knew what he meant. And I knew what I wanted. I replied, tonight. No emoji. No overthinking. Just a door creaking open. He responded instantly. 7 p.m. Come alone. The clock ticked louder as the evening crept in. I changed twice. Then a third time. Settled on black leggings and a loose top that fell off one shoulder. Nothing too loud. But intentional. I told Derek I was going for a late session. He barely looked up. Okay. Grab some milk if you pass by a store. That was all he said. Jason's studio looked different at night. The lights were dimmed. The hallway quiet. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, revealing those same strong forearms, veins slightly bulging. I noticed everything. You came, he said softly, like it was a question and an answer at the same time. I nodded. The pain came back. He gestured toward the padded table. Let's take care of it. I lay down, belly to the cushion, trying to steady my breath. He draped the towel over my hips like always. But this time, his fingers touched slower. Deeper. More intentional. There was no medical explanation for the way he was touching me. Still, I didn't move. He worked in silence. The only sound was my breathing and the soft hum of a wall clock ticking above. His fingers pressed along the curve of my waist, gliding, pausing, memorizing. I felt his presence close behind me, his chest barely brushing my back as he reached forward. My pulse thundered in my ears. I turned slightly, enough to look up at him from the side. Our eyes locked. He paused. Neither of us said a word. He slid his hand down my back, stopping at the waistband again. But this time, his fingers moved inside, just enough. A breath caught in my throat. My hips lifted, barely. And that was it. The moment uncoiled. We moved like two people who'd already imagined this a dozen times. My top came off, tossed carelessly across the chair. His shirt followed. His skin was warm against mine, his lips trailing down my shoulder as his hands explored what I hadn't given to anyone in too long. He was big. Firm. Every motion sure and slow, like he knew exactly what I needed and how long I'd been starved for it. I bit my lip. I didn't stop him. I didn't push him away. His hands gripped my thighs as he pulled me closer to him. I felt my legs tremble. The table creaked softly beneath us. My head tilted back. I could hear nothing but my own heartbeat and the sound of him breathing against my neck. There were no names spoken. No declarations. Just two bodies surrendering. Afterwards, we didn't speak right away. He cleaned his hands, handed me a bottle of water, and sat on the edge of the table. I pulled my top back over one shoulder slowly, still catching my breath. I should go, I whispered. He nodded. But he didn't move. I left without a kiss. Without a goodbye. It wasn't love. It was hunger. Need. The ride home was quiet. The streets blurred by. A numbness settled into my bones, not shame, not regret. Just a quiet hum that felt almost like relief. I walked into the house. Derek was snoring lightly on the couch, TV playing some sports recap in the background. The lamp still on. The same half-empty glass of scotch on the table. I stood there for a long time. Then went upstairs, peeled off my clothes, and stared at myself in the mirror. My lips were slightly swollen from where I'd bitten them. My hair was tousled, my body flushed. But what I saw wasn't guilt. It was proof. I was still alive. Still wanted. Still capable of feeling. Not just pain, but pleasure. Danger. Desire. And when it came down to it, I didn't push him away.